Thanks for tuning into this new video. I appreciate the love and support from each and every one of you. This is a true story about a drug addict whose life is beyond help, so it may trigger past memories for recovering addicts, so just be warned. Otherwise, enjoy and thank you for listening. I used to live in Florida in a small town near the beaches. In 2010, I was called by a colleague of mine to help evaluate a young lady who spoke little English. This young lady was locked in a psych ward. I was told this young lady was a meth addict past beyond help. Her hallucination and imagination was unthinkable. They wanted my help to see if I was able to talk to her about her past history and how she got to this point. I was the same ethnicity as her, so I took the offer to meet this young lady. At first sight, this petite lady stood no taller than 5 feet and was under 90 pounds. Looking at her from the back, her figure was the shape of a young boy. Her hair was cut short just above her neckline. When she turned around, everything about the figure changed. At a distance, her face was very pretty. Her face was pale and glowed like powdered snow. She was in a gown with gray gloves locked tight on both arms. As I got closer, this 21-year-old young lady looked like 40 years old. Her cheekbones were sticking out. Her skin tight to her bones made her eyes appear as they were bulging out. She had wrinkles around her eyes and in the corner of her lips. She had aged badly from this meth addiction. Looking at the young lady, she seemed to be happy to see me. She had a golden smile with decayed yellow teeth. She waved towards me like she knew who I was. I was intrigued by her personality. I wanted to know what she had been through, what she sees, hears, and believes in. Our community was small, so I am not going to give this young lady's name. After 6 months with her, here's her story. I will be telling her story in first person, so the story will be from her point of view. As I sat down, I thought to myself, where did I go wrong in life? Am I really that crazy lady that everyone is afraid of? I grew up watching Korean drama films and loved to listen to Romeo and Juliet love stories. I believed in those. I believed that I was going to be the next Cinderella and find my Prince Charming. I was 17 when we came to the United States from Thailand. We came to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I thought I met the perfect man. He was naughty but smooth. His charisma would make any ladies fall off their heels, and when he played his guitar, his voice would melt everybody's hearts. He was the guy that every woman dreams to be with. He was all mine. All mine. Everywhere he went, I went with him, and eventually my parents kicked me out. He told me this was America, and that I'm free to do whatever I want. So I chose him over my family. I stayed with him thinking that he would love and protect me. I never smoked or drank before. One evening while hanging out with him and several of his friends, he pulled out a glass pipe. He handed the pipe and told me to take one puff for him. I was hesitant at first, and then he convinced me. He said he loves me and would never let me smoke cigarettes because it's bad. But these melting crystals in the glass were not as bad. I was so stupid for believing this handsome guy. I took the puff that would forever change my life. I became a meth addict after that puff. He used the drug to gain control of me. I started to get physically abused by him. I would get kicked, punched, and hit with different objects. It got to the point that I was used to the taste of my own blood. I started to realize that the love wasn't true when his guy friends were doing whatever they liked to me. All he did was stared and laughed. I was his puppet, his cash, nobody to him but a slut, a replaceable item. He wasn't able to pay for rent, so we moved from house to house. Finally, after a year, we were able to find an abandoned home. It was a meth home where several other addicts stayed. I didn't know I was pregnant at the time. This one house in particular stood out because of the supernatural things I saw and heard. It was in a wooded area, and the houses nearby were crappy. These houses were rented out to poor drug addict people like us who were barely able to survive. One lonely evening when my boyfriend wasn't home, I took a few puffs and was high within minutes. I started hearing a baby cry throughout the house. I thought it was nothing, but the cries started getting louder and louder. It stopped right by my bedroom. I was in the basement this whole time, and the bedroom was one level above me. The cries stopped by my bedroom, so I ran up to investigate but didn't find anything. I walked back to the living room, and as I was going down the stairs to the basement, the cries of the baby could be heard in the living room, where I had gotten high. I slowly walked down the stairs, and there I saw a little boy whose face was red. The redness on his face wasn't the most noticeable part. It was his big dark lips. The lips were as dark as charcoal. The boy was no taller than my table, which was 2 feet high. He was playing with my glass pipe and pretended to take puffs from it. The little boy looked up to me and I froze. Before I could run back out, the door slammed shut behind me, and all I could do was cover my ears with my eyes tightly shut, hoping the boy would disappear. That following night, I went to bed alone because my boyfriend was out doing his business with his friends. I was in bed for a few minutes and I heard footsteps running around the house. I could distinctively tell that the footsteps were of a young boy. The boy was running up and down the house, opening and closing the basement door on his way in and out. He ran by my door and stopped. I carefully listened to see if he was going to come inside the room. He made a clicking noise from his tongue and opened the door. At that very moment I froze. I wasn't frozen in fear, but I was paralyzed. I could not move no matter how hard I tried. The boy entered the room, and it was the same boy I had seen earlier that day. He slowly walked up to me and brushed my hair with his little 2 hands. He wept and bawled his eyes out. The boy stopped crying and climbed up my bed to stand on top of my stomach. I was paralyzed with my body facing up. He then started jumping on my stomach. I am not sure if it was real or a dream, but it hurt so much. It felt like he was stabbing me every time one of his feet landed on my stomach. All I could do was lay there and listen to the intense pain. After a few jumps, the boy jumped off and disappeared into the hallway. Another incident of this boy was when my boyfriend saw the kid with me when I was getting high alone. He came home from work and I was alone in the basement. He said when he saw me, there was a boy playing with my hair, trying to braid it. He had thought the little boy was a cousin's kid that needed me to babysit. He went to the restroom and suddenly remembered that I was an outcast. I was a drug addict. No one would want their kids near me. He rushed back to the living room and the boy was gone. However, he was so sure the boy was there with me because he heard the boy's voices when he entered the house and when he was in the bathroom. I am not sure if all of these experiences were side effects of the drugs, but we have heard of the cries many times when we weren't high. Now that I think about all of these, I think the boy was sent to help me cope with my life. You will know about it in a few seconds. So anyways, we moved out of this place. While staying at this new place, I gave birth unexpectedly. I remembered feeling the most painful cramp sensation I ever had. Moments later, a warm fluid flowed between my legs. I was bleeding so much, it soiled through my only pants. My jeans turned from blue to dark purple. I was so scared that I thought I was going to die. I was also in so much pain, but there was a white guy who came up to me and handed me a pipe. He told me to hush and smoke it. After I smoked it all, it relieved me from my pain. It relaxed my mind and I was able to breathe. I felt a small warm budge between my pelvic area under my jeans. I unzipped to reach down and grabbed something. I was still high and that something was a baby. I was excited to see that it was a baby. It was my first child, a handsome boy covered in red. I held him in my palm. No one can ever explain the joy of being a mother. As I held onto my naked child, the man who helped produce this child looked in disgust. I told him it was his child, but he kept living in a world of denial. He told me my son was a gift from the devil. How dare this man call our son that? He told me to throw it away. He started to call me crazy. It was him who had everyone in the house thinking I was crazy. The only way to justify my son was naming him Miracle, because he is a miracle from the Lord and not the devil like they said. I was in my own little circle ever since the rumor that I was crazy. For whatever reason, my breast wasn't milking like I thought it would. I had to find ways to feed my son and I tried my best to squeeze my nipples, but nothing would drip. I didn't want my son to starve from hunger. I knew my taste of blood was enough to get me through the times I had no food. I started to chew the end of my finger just deep enough to have a steady blood flow. I would have Miracle suck on the tip of my finger to fulfill his little tummy. Every time Miracle wasn't crying, I knew he was full and happy. His smile warmed my heart. It was him who helped me through the tough times. My body was weak from not eating because I only smoked. I knew my son was draining my energy too. I had to figure out a way that I can support the both of us. At nighttime, I started to sell my body outside of the home. I had to make sure Miracle was hidden from the rest of the world, including his dad. Each night before I head out, I would feed Miracle to make sure he was full. I didn't want people to find him, so I would lay Miracle in an old torn shoebox, open the vent in my room, and put the box in between the dry walls. After working a shift, I would come home before daylight and be with my son. I have learned to hate all the people who were in the house, including Miracle's father. I have kept a distance from them since I was the crazy woman. The only time we would come together was to get high, otherwise no communications. Over time, Miracle's dad had gotten arrested for stealing a vehicle, but we didn't care because we got each other. On the early morning of August 16th, I woke up to cramps. A voice in me screamed in pain. Miracle was asleep beside me in his box. This cramp was bothering me. I felt like I needed to go use the bathroom, almost like a bowel movement. As I stood up, the pain intensified so intensely that it caused me to fall back to the ground. I couldn't move. My back felt like it was breaking. A paranoid white guy came over and whispered to shut the heck up, and then ran back to another room. I looked over to my little Miracle, who was now up, just smiling and filled with happiness. I was sad because I knew my pain was something different. I nipped the tip of my ring finger and fed his tiny mouth. I stared at him, not knowing his or my future. I just cried as I looked at him so happily sucking away. I wish he only knew how hard and cruel this world was. The pain just keeps building inside of me. From my stomach down, my body was rock hard and my legs were helpless. All of a sudden, I heard people yelling and running around the rooms next to me. Someone yelled that they saw the pigs. As people were running out of the house, I saw my helpless Miracle just smiling. I tucked Miracle back to his little box. I crawled over to the vent in the wall and hid Miracle. As I turned around, I saw lights shining through the holes in the wall. I remember hearing them yell out that they were the police. I was so scared that they would find Miracle and take him away from me. I crawled and dragged my body to where the officers were to distract them. As I got to the two officers with their shining bright lights, I heard Miracle cry out loud. I was too weak to stop the officers from going to my room. Both officers looked towards the room where Miracle was with their guns out. I was too weak, too tired to stop them. They asked me several times if there was a kid inside the house. I couldn't answer them. I was too weak and blacked out. I remembered waking up to bright lights. It hurts my eyes looking around. A woman who looked like my mom was beside me. She asked how I was doing and who I was. She claimed to be an interpreter. I didn't know how to answer this woman. All I asked for was my son Miracle. The lady looked confused as she didn't know where Miracle was. I knew in my heart she was with the government and is keeping Miracle away from me. After a few minutes of going nowhere, the lady then told me that I had a miscarriage. She said I have lost a lot of blood and will be hospitalized until I gain enough strength. I knew I was being lied to. I knew this lady was part of the government who took my child. I was tired of the games they were playing at the hospital. All I wanted to do was see Miracle, but they wouldn't let me. I fought with them and now I am here without Miracle. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see Miracle next to me in his small box. He would always be happy, smiling at me. Sometimes I can hear his voice calling out to me in the middle of the night. I know he misses me and I know he is in this building somewhere. There was one time I sharpened a pencil and threatened to slit my throat if they didn't let me see my kid Miracle. I only wanted to hug and kiss him for one last time. I begged them, and when I realized that they would not let me see him, I dropped the pencil and they wrestled me down. After that incident, I would see an Asian boy about 1 foot tall by the side of my bed when I slept. He usually comes after dark and sits on the floor next to me telling me he was my baby boy, my baby Miracle. Sometimes he loves to get on the bed with me and tells me stories. At first the stories were about us and how much he missed me. But then the stories began to change to how much he hated the people who worked in this building. They are stopping us from being together, and that for us to be together, I would have to harm them and myself. This lady has had 3 unsuccessful suicide attempts. She told me all of the attempts were miracles ideas. It should be noted, according to the police report, the 2 officers said the female came up to them with blood dripping down her chin. They noticed she was heavily soiled and unknown at the time was blood on her pants. They followed the line of blood towards the room where they heard the baby cry. They said the baby kept crying through the wall. They saw a vent by the wall that had blood all over, and when they opened the vent, the crying stopped. They found a molded box covered in dried blood. As they opened the box, they saw a bunch of blood-soaked newspaper. Inside the newspaper was a small bloody figure, the size of a 3-inch jalapeno pepper. Upon closer look, that was when the officer noticed it had arms and legs. Some of the people who were stopped that night that stayed in the same home also noted that they have heard a baby crying before. They stated that this young lady needed help mentally. However, none of them have seen a child. Police searched everywhere in that home, but no child was found. There was no crying after the box was located. The medical examiner said the fetus found was less than 16 weeks and was considered a miscarriage. When I left the psych ward, the young lady still believed that miracle was alive and hidden from her. If anyone is struggling, I want to let you know that as humans, we often try to rush into tasks or accomplish goals in a short amount of time, but this approach doesn't work with addiction recovery. Successfully recovering from addiction requires you to take it one step at a time. A little bit every day goes a long way, so don't dwell on the past. Think of your past mistakes as a training ground for the person you've now become. Don't let the regret and guilt from your past behavior burden your present. You must forgive yourself and move on. Put the past behind and focus on the new, sober you. My friend recently died from an overdose. His celebration of life was last weekend. Only the people there weren't celebrating. They were crying. In attendance were many of his friends and family. They stood up at the podium, with tears in their eyes, and shared fond memories of him. His family spoke of his huge heart and his infectious smile. You could feel their love for him all the way to the back row. That's where I was sitting. I couldn't help wishing he was there to hear it all. I bet you didn't think you'd die from that last puff. I bet you didn't know so many people loved you. You didn't know your son wished you had stopped. You are an awesome guy, who will be missed terribly. If you thought about your son at all, you likely told yourself you'd call him tomorrow. That's how addiction deludes us and keeps those struggling sick. We tell ourselves we will deal with our responsibilities tomorrow. Only for my friend, tomorrow never came. I hope you all keep this message and the moral of the story in your heart. Be smart on who you hang out with and what you do in life. Life is precious and short. Enjoy it and be the person you'd want your kids to be when they grow up. Thank you for listening to this true story of this lady. Have a wonderful day. I wish you all a long and healthy life.